Jerk's boots slipped on the slick, iridescent surface of Lysara's landing platform, and for a moment the universe seemed to pause, as if even the hovering drones had leaned closer to watch the spectacle. He flailed, arms windmilling, and somehow managed a spin that would have impressed a circus acrobat if gravity here weren't being so disagreeably selective. Then, with the grace of a falling meteor, he landed in a puddle of shimmering liquid that wasn't quite water, wasn't quite oil, and possibly had a minor consciousness judging him for his clumsiness. A small mechanical beep escaped from his belt, as if his suit were rolling its own eyes. First impressions, Jerk, he muttered to himself, nailed it. Above him, Lysara observed from her platform, her long ears twitching like delicate antennae as she leaned forward, one elbow perched on an angular rail. Her gaze was sharp, calculating, but something in the way she cocked her head, like a cat watching a particularly foolish bird, made him think she was more entertained than offended. "You have a very human approach to infiltration," she said, her voice smooth but edged with an undercurrent that promised fire if he pushed too far. Jerk stood, brushing off whatever had tried to cling to his suit, and saluted awkwardly. "Thank you, ma'am. First time on a new planet, zero gravity, and I had no manual for a don't belly flop in alien puddles." His grin was uneven, half charm, half self-preservation. Lysara's lips curved into what might almost have been a smile. "You have survived longer than most humans who think courage alone will carry them through my defenses," she said, curious. He bowed theatrically, nearly tripping again. "I like to think of it as optimistic incompetence." She raised an eyebrow, her long ears shifting forward, an unspoken question. "And you believe that optimism will save you?" "That depends on the definition of save," Jerk replied, glancing around the platform as a pair of hovering drones zipped past, emitting an irritated series of beeps. "If it's keep me alive and moderately entertaining, then yes. Optimism, charm, and occasional accidental heroics." A flicker of amusement passed over Lysara's face. "You speak freely for someone who has just landed on my territory." "Territory? This place looks more like a floating amusement park if the rides were slightly hostile, and the Daker had a taste for chaos," he said, gesturing to the shimmering towers that bent light in impossible ways, some twisting upward like liquid sculptures, others pulsing with soft neon. "Where do I sign the waiver?" Her laugh, quiet but melodic, surprised him. "There is no waiver, there is only choice, and you human have made the first of many questionable ones by being here." "Questionable? No, I call it boldly misguided." Jerk winked, then immediately realized she probably wouldn't appreciate that. Her expression, though, softened ever so slightly, the corners of her mouth twitching. "Boldly misguided," he muttered to himself. "Better than falling into alien goo, I guess." She studied him, and for a moment there was only the hum of the hovering drones and the distant vibration of the planet's magnetic storms. "You amuse me, human. I expected fear, pleading, or instantaneous regret." "I try to keep things lively," he said. "Makes the end-of-the-world scenarios more digestible, like adding cheese to your survival rations. Essential." "Cheese," she repeated, as though testing the word on her tongue. "Curious. I will allow you to accompany me for observation, though I warn you, one mistake, one display of foolish bravado beyond acceptable limits, and I will not hesitate." Jerk's eyes sparkled. "One mistake, huh? Well, that's encouragingly vague. I can definitely work with that. Rules are my favorite kind of challenge." He paused, leaning slightly toward her. "Also, you might want to consider, if I survive, hiring me as a morale officer. I have a gift for comic relief in hostile situations." Her ears twitched with suspicion or amusement, he could never tell which. "I have no need for morale officers. You are a subject of interest, nothing more." "Subject of interest. Excellent. I always wanted to be in a study, preferably one with lab coats and dramatic music." He snapped his fingers, realizing too late that sound didn't behave normally in this half-gravity environment, and the echo ricocheted in a minor sonic prank across the platform. A passing drone beeped indignantly, and Jerk held up his hands apologetically. "See, already making friends." She shook her head almost imperceptibly. "Perhaps your audacity is useful for now." The first task she set before him was deceptively simple: navigate the city's observation grid and retrieve data on rogue energy pulses that had been disrupting her communication networks. "You will follow the path, avoid detection, and, if possible, do not embarrass yourself," she said, though the faint twitch of her mouth betrayed her curiosity in seeing how he would fail. Jerk straightened his stance, looking at the sprawling, floating city, its towers bending and folding light in geometries that made no sense to his human brain. "Embarrass myself? Never. That's the plan anyway." He took a step onto the nearest transit pad and immediately slid backward, narrowly catching a railing. Lysara's ears twitched violently, whether with concern or exasperation, he couldn't tell. "Perhaps the plan needs revision," he muttered, hopping forward and activating his suit's stabilization thrusters, which fired with a sputtering pop and a puff of smoke. "Technical difficulties minor. Nothing to see here." A drone zoomed past, circling him as if judging, while Lysara's gaze followed, sharp and unyielding. "You are interesting human," she said. "Interesting is my middle name," he replied. "Well, not legally, but it should be." As the two moved across the city, her gliding effortlessly, him wobbling with occasional near disasters, they encountered rogue security drones, shimmering fields that twisted gravity, and holographic illusions that tried to convince him the sky was falling. Jerk responded with a combination of clever improvisation and sheer dumb luck, often quipping to Lysara about gravity's sense of humor, or photonic pranksters, while narrowly avoiding disaster. By the time they reached the control hub, Lysara's judgment of him had shifted slightly. He was still reckless, unpredictable, and entirely human, but there was a spark in his daring and wit that made her reconsider the initial plan of instant annihilation. Perhaps this human, with his endless chatter and ill-timed heroics, could prove useful. Perhaps even he might make the world a little more interesting. "Do not mistake amusement for weakness," she said as they paused at the hub's threshold. "One misstep, and I will not hesitate." "Understood," Jerk said, raising an eyebrow and giving a lopsided salute. "But if I may, you'll find I'm more skilled at surviving missteps than most species, first attempts at intelligence." She studied him for a long moment, the corners of her lips twitching in something very close to the beginnings of a smile, her long ears tilting in an unreadable pattern. "We shall see, human. We shall see." And as Jerk stepped into the glowing labyrinth of the control hub, almost tripping on a floating cable, he thought, "This is going to be fun. Dangerous, terrifying, and probably fatal, but fun." The first sparks of an improbable partnership had begun. Jerk stumbled through the control hub, his suit's thrusters sputtering and popping, leaving tiny sparks in the air like miniature fireworks, while Lysara glided beside him, her long ears flicking as she monitored the holographic data streams that shimmered around them. "You know, I'm beginning to suspect these holograms have a sense of humor," he said, ducking under a floating panel that twisted sideways like it had its own mood swings. "They seem to enjoy making me look like a circus act." "They are programmed to respond to intrusions," Lysara replied, her voice calm, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of amusement. "It appears they are overachieving today." "I appreciate their dedication," Jerk said, hopping over a sudden energy barrier. "Truly, I respect commitment." As they navigated the labyrinthine hub, he accidentally triggered a panel that projected a massive holographic map of the city, spinning uncontrollably and projecting flashing icons that hovered in midair. "Ah," Jerk said, squinting, "it's the holographic equivalent of throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping it makes sense. My specialty." Lysara's ears twitched sharply. "You are absurd," she said. "And you're enjoying it," he countered with a grin, narrowly catching a sliding rail and twisting midair to avoid a pulse of electromagnetic energy. You've been smiling since we started, admit it. Humans are excellent at making the impossible entertaining. I am not smiling, she said, though the corner of her lips betrayed her. I am merely assessing the impact of your unorthodox methods. Assessment, huh? Jerk said, pointing at the floating holograms. I call it improvisation with flair. You might consider updating your terminology. They continued through corridors that bent light in impossible angles, walls shifting as if breathing, the very structure of the hub alive with semi-sentient technology. Jerk found himself clinging to handholds, performing acrobatics that would have made any acrobat envious or horrified. At one point, he launched himself off a rail, spinning like a pinwheel, only to land in a storage pod filled with anti-gravity tools, sending him floating lazily upside down. Lysara watched, ears twitching. You are remarkable in your capacity for chaos. Remarkable, Jerk said, dangling by one foot. I try to keep things interesting. If I survive this mission, I expect a medal, a parading ceremony, and possibly a minor asteroid named in my honor. The next challenge came in the form of rogue security drones, sleek machines that zipped through the hub at dizzying speeds, firing pulses that bent light around them like liquid mirrors. Jerk's first instinct was to run, but his second instinct, unfortunately, involved hopping onto a maintenance drone and using it as a makeshift skateboard. He careened through the corridors, squealing, and narrowly avoided a collision with a twisting light column. Lysara followed, her movements precise and fluid, manipulating the energy fields to divert drones away from him with a flick of her hand. You are infuriating, she muttered, though her voice lacked any true malice. And you're secretly impressed, Jerk said, pointing at her. Your long ears aren't just for show, you know, excellent for tactical monitoring. Maybe they double as radar dishes. She ignored him, but the faint twitch of her ears suggested she might have considered the joke. By the time they reached the observation deck, overlooking the swirling city below, Jerk was panting, floating slightly from exertion and the residual effects of the anti-gravity zones. Well, he said, leaning against a control console that hovered in midair, if surviving isn't an art form, I don't know what is. Also, do you ever worry these panels have a mind of their own? Because I swear one just winked at me. They are sentient enough to correct intruders, Lysara replied. It is their duty. Correction noted, Jerk said. Though next time, a little warning before sending lasers would be appreciated. I prefer my existential crises with a cup of tea. Lysara's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. Your humor persists despite danger, curiously persistent. He shrugged. It's a gift, sometimes curse, sometimes survival tactic. You'd be amazed how a well-timed joke can confuse a sentient laser beam. They paused to analyze the rogue energy pulses disrupting Lysara's communications. Holographic readings showed chaotic distortions in the city's power grid, and Lysara worked methodically, fingers tracing glowing symbols in midair, bending the data streams into coherent patterns. Jerk leaned over, squinting at the projections. Looks like the city is having a very dramatic sneeze, he said. I'd cover my nose if I were you. Humor and observation is noted, she said, ears flicking. Do not mistake levity for incompetence. Levity is a core competency, Jerk replied, spinning to avoid a sudden surge of anti-gravity flux. I take it very seriously. As they worked together, the rhythm of their partnership began to form. Jerk's unpredictable improvisation complemented Lysara's precise calculations. He slipped on panels, tripped over invisible energy streams, and still managed to devise solutions she hadn't anticipated, while she gently manipulated the city's sentient infrastructure to keep him from inadvertently triggering its self-defense systems. Between crises, they shared banter about alien flora that seemed to sigh when touched, security drones with artistic tendencies, and Jerk's ongoing fascination with her long ears. Seriously, he said, dangling from a floating console, those ears could catch a subspace signal from 3 light-years away. I mean, You might already know I'm thinking of snack time before I even say it. They have their uses, she admitted, almost imperceptibly. I did not anticipate you would be one of them. And yet here we are, he said, landing awkwardly and giving a triumphant fist pump, defying expectations, surviving improbable hazards, and possibly inventing a new form of human-alien teamwork. We're basically history in motion, or comedy, depends on perspective. By the end of their observation, the rogue energy pulses had been mapped, stabilized, and rerouted with minimal damage. Jerk leaned against a railing, panting, wires sticking out of his suit in minor arcs of static electricity. And that, Lysara, is how you turn near-certain disaster into a mildly inconvenient afternoon. She tilted her head, ears twitching in ways that almost suggested approval. You have value beyond entertainment, perhaps more than I expected. Expected, Jerk said. I thrive on low expectations. Makes surviving and impressing you extra fun. They left the observation hub with a tentative camaraderie forming between them. Lysara, once ready to annihilate the human intruder, now regarded him with a measure of curiosity and reluctant respect. Jerk, in turn, recognized her cunning, her power, and the small flashes of humor she allowed herself in his presence. Floating through the corridors toward the exit, Jerk turned, attempting to look profound, and immediately tripped on a shifting floor panel. And that, he said, dangling from a support beam, is why life is never boring with me around. Lysara's ears flicked sharply. You are impossible. But entertaining, yes, he asked, grinning. I take it as a compliment. Her lips quirked again, and for a fleeting instant she allowed herself a rare laugh, quiet but genuine. It echoed in the hallways, a sound Jerk found far more satisfying than any victory or treasure in his adventures. In the chaos, jokes, and peril of the city, a fragile bond had begun to form. Humor had become a bridge between worlds, and trust, tentative but growing, was weaving its way into the partnership of human and alien. Jerk floated slightly in midair, letting the small arcs of static electricity dance across his suit. You know, Lysara, he said, I think this is the beginning of a very unusual friendship, or alliance, or spectacularly catastrophic team-up, whatever you call it, I'm in. She studied him, long ears angled toward him in an expression he was learning to interpret as contemplation. Perhaps it is. And for the first time since he set foot on her territory, Jerk felt that surviving the day might just be the start of something far stranger, far more thrilling, and far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The alarm sounded with a piercing wail that bounced off the iridescent towers of Lysara's city, a sound that could curdle plasma if one weren't careful. Jerk yelped, almost tripping over his own boots, and scrambled to straighten the blinking devices on his suit. Well, he said, puffing out his chest as if that would somehow make the chaos less chaotic, looks like the universe wants a dramatic encore. I was hoping for tea first, but apparently danger is on the menu. Lysara's long ears twitched sharply. This is no minor disturbance, human. The invaders have arrived. Their fleet bends light, warps gravity, and they do not negotiate. Jerk paused, raising a finger as if formulating a profound thought. Warping gravity, huh? I take it breakfast is not included either. Her lips twitched. Focus. The city shook as the first of the invaders. Ships appeared. Enormous vessels shimmering like liquid metal under the light of the twin suns. They bent reality around them, their hulls refracting space itself in impossible angles, and drones scurried like frantic insects attempting to defend the city. Jerk ducked instinctively, bumping into a floating console and sending sparks into the air. Ah, friendly fire, he quipped, very polite, very subtle. Do not jest, Lysara snapped, though her ears flicked with something that resembled suppressed amusement. Lives are at stake. Jerk straightened, balancing precariously on the anti-gravity rails. Noted. Lives at stake. Also, chaos incoming. Let's get to it, partner, or co-strategist, or whatever title fits someone who's about to break the universe in style. Together, they coordinated the city's defenses. Lysara manipulated energy fields with precision, bending the incoming beams of light and gravity-warping pulses away from key structures. Jerk, improvising as usual, rode a maintenance drone through the corridors, manually triggering countermeasures while narrating each move with a dramatic flair. And here we see the heroic human narrowly avoiding death again. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for bravery and mild insanity. Lysara shot him a sharp look, but the faint twitch of her lips betrayed a flicker of amusement. You are reckless beyond comprehension. And yet effective, Jerk said, twisting midair to redirect a rogue laser pulse. See, reckless effectiveness, a fine human trait. The invaders. Attacks grew more complex, bending gravity in spirals that made it almost impossible to predict their trajectories. Jerk found himself sliding along the walls, using his suit's thrusters to perform flips that would have been impressive if gravity weren't trying to punch him in the face. I swear, he shouted over the hum of energy and alarms, these guys have a personal vendetta against my balance. Lysara used his antics to her advantage, diverting enemy attacks toward his improvised maneuvers, which somehow, through a mixture of luck, wit, and audacity, ended up destabilizing the invaders' formations. Your absurdity, she said, is tactically useful. See, Jerk said, spinning midair to deflect a pulse with a conveniently placed energy shield. Who knew comedy could be weaponized? They fought side by side, Lysara's precision complementing Jerk's unpredictable creativity. He rigged a series of floating conduits to redirect the invaders' gravitational distortions back onto their ships, while she guided entire sections of the city's infrastructure to act as giant traps. At one point, Jerk accidentally pressed the wrong panel, causing a holographic fountain to spray a stream of light at an approaching ship. And that, he said with mock solemnity, is how you blind a galactic invader with style. The battle raged, chaos and laughter entwined, until the final invader ship approached the city's core. Lysara and Jerk exchanged a glance, silent communication forged through days of shared danger and humor. With a nod, he launched himself onto a hover rail, ricocheting through the control consoles to activate the city's central defense array. Watch closely, he said, as human ingenuity and sheer reckless charm saved the day. Lysara's hands moved over the energy matrix, her long ears twitching with precision. Together, they synchronized the city's systems, bending light, gravity, and energy pulses into a flawless trap. The final invader ship was caught in a spiral of energy, distorted and immobilized, its crew bewildered as the city absorbed and redirected their own attacks. Silence fell as the last pulse dissipated. Jerk floated in midair, panting, wires sparking from his suit in harmless arcs. And we did it. Victory! He shouted, giving a triumphant spin and nearly colliding with a hovering drone. Lysara's long ears flicked, her expression unreadable for a moment, then softened. You have exceeded my expectations, human, she said, perhaps more than I anticipated. You have courage, audacity, and a strange usefulness that cannot be ignored. Jerk grinned, brushing sparks from his suit. I'll take it. Audacious, courageous, and now useful, plus highly entertaining, seems like a solid performance. She studied him, and for a moment the weight of her past, the battles, betrayals, and endless scheming seemed to ease. I intended to destroy you, she admitted softly. But I see now that choice can be different. That there is more to alliance than conquest, and perhaps I choose differently. Jerk floated closer, eyes wide. Differently, huh? I like different, it suits me, makes life more fun. Her lips curved into a faint but genuine smile. You will remain by my side, not as subject, not as pawn, but as equal, perhaps companion. Companion, Jerk shouted, almost losing balance in his excitement. I accept all titles, as long as danger and chaos remain in the package, preferably with snacks. They moved to the observation platform, overlooking the city now safe and humming with restored energy. The twin suns reflected off the towers, bending light in ways that would have confounded any ordinary human mind, but Jerk merely admired the spectacle. "You know," he said, floating lazily, "I came here expecting to die. Or be eaten, or worst case awkwardly be turned into a decoration. But surviving and winning, that's a plot twist I like." Lysara's ears twitched, a subtle gesture that spoke of amusement and approval. "You have adapted. You have grown beyond the recklessness I first encountered. That is commendable. And you," Jerk said, floating closer, "have learned to tolerate, even enjoy, chaos and bad jokes. A remarkable transformation in itself." She allowed herself a small laugh, quiet, musical, yet filled with warmth. "Perhaps we have both changed, human. Perhaps this is the beginning of something new." He grinned, looking out across the city. "New adventures, new friends, new enemies to improvise against. I like the sound of that." The city hummed beneath them, safe, alive, and full of possibilities. The human warrior and the alien queen stood side by side, allies forged in peril and humor, their bond now sealed by trust, laughter, and shared survival. The galaxy, for all its vastness, suddenly felt smaller, more intimate, and full of promise. Jerk flexed his fingers, sparks still dancing harmlessly. "So, Lysara T." She rolled her eyes, long ears flicking in mock exasperation. "We have earned it. Perhaps we begin there." And as the twin suns set, casting fractured light across the city, they looked out together, ready for whatever the universe had in store, partners bound not by necessity, but by choice, courage, and an improbable, enduring humor.